The auction bell clanged once, sharp, cold, and final. Cale Ryder turned in his saddle, squinting through the rising dust. The whole town of Dry Hollow had gathered, faces pale under the noon glare. Up on the wooden platform stood a girl with her wrists bound in front of her, hair falling like tangled ink down her shoulder. She didn't look up when the marshal spoke. "Property of the Hollis estate," the man announced, voice flat as his eyes. "Quiet, good worker, branded but harmless." Laughter rolled through the crowd like tumbleweed. Cale felt something twist in his gut. He'd ridden through towns like this before, where a woman's worth got tallied like horse feed. He'd learned to keep quiet, keep moving. But this time, something in the air made him stay. The girl lifted her head for the first time. The world seemed to still. On her left wrist, half hidden under dirt, was an old tattoo, a circular mark with a crescent inside it. He'd seen that mark once before, years back in a canyon full of gunfire and smoke. He'd been bleeding out, and a pair of small hands pressed cloth to his wound. The same mark had flashed beneath moonlight then, just before he passed out. When he woke, his life had been spared, and the person was gone. Now that mark was here. On her, Cale dismounted, boots thudding against dry earth. "What's her name?" he asked. The marshal smirked. "Alara, doesn't speak much. Folks say she's cursed. Came from the northern tribes, maybe. Price starts at $10. Someone in the crowd spat. "Wouldn't give $2. The girl's eyes moved for the first time, not in fear, not in anger, just quiet acceptance, as if she'd already learned that words never changed anything. Cale's voice cut through the murmur. "Stop," heads turned. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "I'll buy her," he said simply. The marshal blinked. "You sure, Ryder?" "She ain't the kind of help a man like you needs." Cale's jaw flexed. "Maybe not, but I'll take her." A few coins clinked into the man's hand. The marshal shrugged and sliced through the rope around her wrists. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed that no drama had come of it. Cale handed Alara his canteen. "You can drink," he said softly. She didn't move. "Suit yourself," he murmured, sliding the canteen back. He wasn't used to being anyone's savior, didn't even like the word. Still, he couldn't walk away from that mark. Not after what it meant. They left town without another word. The road stretched wide and empty, a long stripe of dust beneath a sky the color of worn leather. Cale led his horse. Alara walked a few paces behind, shawl drawn tight, bare feet whispering against the dirt. After an hour, he spoke again. "You always this quiet?" No answer. Just the sound of wind brushing through sagebrush. He tried again. "You remember me?" Her steps slowed. He turned, expecting nothing, but her eyes met his, steady and calm. For a second, he thought he saw a flicker of recognition there. Or maybe he just wanted to. By sunset, they reached a small creek. Cale loosened the saddle, lit a small fire. She sat across from him, knees drawn up, watching the flames without fear. He offered her jerky. She took it silently, hands trembling slightly. He studied her face in the firelight. The dirt, the exhaustion, the quiet defiance. And that mark, faintly visible again, curved like a secret moon. Cale leaned back against a rock, the crackle of fire filling the silence. What are the odds, he thought, that the same hands that once stopped my bleeding would end up here, sold like a mule in Dry Hollow? The thought made his chest ache. Alara looked up then, as if she'd heard it. The firelight caught in her eyes. Not pleading, not broken, just tired. Cale exhaled through his nose, slow. "Well," he muttered, voice low and rough. "Reckon we'll figure out who owes who in the morning." The night settled over them, a heavy, wordless truce beneath the desert stars. The storm rolled in by dawn, the kind that chewed at the roof and rattled the bones. Cale Ryder guided his horse up the narrow ridge trail, water running off his hat brim. Behind him, Alara moved steady despite the rain, her shawl soaked through, her face unreadable. The mountain cabin came into view, a weathered shape half hidden by the pines, smoke long gone cold from its chimney. When they stepped inside, it smelled of damp ash and old wood. Cale struck a match, coaxing the fire back to life. "Ain't much," he muttered, "but it keeps the wind out." Alara stood just past the threshold, dripping on the floorboards. Her eyes swept the small room, rough table, tin kettle, a single bunk, and then came back to him. She didn't speak, but she didn't look afraid either. Cale tossed her a wool blanket. Here, you'll freeze. She caught it clumsily, wrapping it close. He turned back to the fire, feeling her presence like a quiet echo. He'd spent years alone in that cabin, talking to the walls, arguing with ghosts, and now every sound she made seemed to stretch time itself. The rain hit harder against the roof. After a long silence, he said, "You hungry?" She nodded once. He opened a small tin and poured beans into an iron pan, adding water from his canteen. The fire hissed. "Ain't fancy," he said, "but it'll do." When he handed her the tin bowl, she murmured something, so soft he almost missed it. What was that? "Thank you," she said, voice barely there, like a secret not meant for the world. He froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. It was the first time he'd heard her speak. Not the sound he expected, gentler, younger, but there was weight in it, the kind born from silence too long carried. He nodded, pretending it meant nothing. "You're welcome." The firelight shifted, catching on her wrist. That mark again, faded but still clear. He found himself staring before he could stop. She noticed. Slowly, she pulled her sleeve down. Cale cleared his throat. "Didn't mean to pry." "You weren't," she said quietly. "Folks just stare. Guess they don't know what they're looking at." Alara's eyes flicked up, studying him. "And you do?" He hesitated. The rain filled the space between them. "Maybe," he said finally. "I seen one like it before." Her breath caught, almost too subtle to hear. "Where?" He looked into the fire. "Long time back. South Canyon. I was shot up bad. Someone patched me. Small hands. Moved fast. When I came to, all that was left was that same mark in the dirt." Alara's hand tightened on the bowl. "And you lived?" "Reckon so," he said, smiling faintly. "Been regretting it ever since." A flicker of warmth crossed her face. Something close to a smile, but too shy to stay. Outside, thunder rolled across the ridge. Cale stood, moving to check the shutters. The roof groaned, rain spilling through a crack. "We'll need to mend that come morning." She rose too, holding out the blanket to him. "You should rest." "I'll keep the fire," he studied. Her, this quiet woman the world had thrown away, and felt that old unease again. Gratitude, guilt, wonder. They tangled together like barbed wire in his chest. "You keep it," he said softly. "Fire don't burn right without someone watching it." She didn't argue. Just turned back to the flames, tucking her knees under the blanket. Cale lay down on the cot, boots still on, staring at the rafters. The rhythm of rain and fire lulled him, but not enough to drown the thoughts crowding his head. He'd meant to buy her out of pity, maybe out of debt to some old memory. But sitting there, watching her face glow orange in the lamplight, he realized pity had nothing to do with it. This wasn't a rescue. It was the start of something neither of them understood yet. Outside, the storm raged on, washing away the dust of Dry Hollow. Inside, for the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. Morning came soft and silver. The storm had passed, leaving the pines dripping and the air smelling of clean earth and wet bark. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to red coals. Cale Ryder stirred first, boots still on from the night before. He found Alara already awake, crouched near the stove, blowing gently on a small flame she'd coaxed back to life. The smell of coffee, thin but real, filled the room. "You make that?" he asked, voice rough from sleep. She nodded without turning. There was a little left in the tin. "Well," he said, sitting up, "you might have just saved my life again." The corner of her mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "I thought you didn't need saving." He rubbed his jaw, feeling the bristle. "Nobody does. Until they do." For a while, the only sound was the fire and the soft clink of tin cups. He watched her move, quiet, steady, like someone who'd lived most of her life trying not to make noise. Every gesture had care in it. After breakfast, he stepped outside. The sky had cleared, the sun barely warming the ridge. Cale breathed deep, stretching his shoulders. The world felt washed clean, but his thoughts were heavy. That mark on her wrist, it wasn't just memory anymore. It was proof the past wasn't done with him. He heard her behind him. "You keep things tidy," she said. He turned. She stood on the porch, hair drying in the light, the blanket folded neatly over her arm. "Don't much like clutter," he said. "Out here mess gets you bitter broke." She leaned against the post. "And yet you brought me." Cale smiled faintly. Guess I figured you weren't the kind that breaks easy. For a second, something passed between them, small but strong, like a current under still water. Then she looked away. They spent the day working in silence. He split wood. She patched a tear in one of his old shirts with thread she'd found in a tin box. The rhythm of shared work settled into something almost peaceful. At one point, he caught her humming, just a few low notes. It startled him more than a gunshot would have. That a song? He asked. Maybe, she said, eyes still on the fabric. Something my mother used to hum. I don't remember the words. He nodded slowly. Sometimes the tune's all a body needs. She glanced up. You hum? He chuckled. Only when I'm drinking, and that ain't a sound fit for company. She smiled then, real and unguarded. It changed her face completely. Cale felt the air in his chest shift, like he'd been holding his breath without knowing it. Later, as the light faded, they sat outside on the step. The valley below was wrapped in gold. Birds moved low through the grass. Alara spoke first. Why did you help me? In town. He didn't answer right away. Because I saw something I recognized. My mark, he nodded. Long time ago I was near dead. Someone with that same mark pulled me out. Never forgot it, her voice softened. That was my mother. Cale looked up sharply. She found a man bleeding near the canyon, Alara said. Said he was stubborn, even half dead. Told me once, if you ever meet a man with eyes like winter, don't turn away. Cale swallowed hard. Your mother? His voice trailed. She didn't make it, did she? Alara shook her head. Sickness took her. A few winters later, silence fell. Only the wind spoke, brushing the tall grass like a slow hand. He wanted to say something. Thank you, maybe. But the words wouldn't fit. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small silver button, dull with age. Been carrying this ever since that night, he said. She tore it off my coat when she patched me up. Figured I'd give it back someday. Alara looked at it in his palm, eyes glistening. You already did, she whispered. Cale didn't know what to do with that kind of grace. So he just sat there beside her, watching the sun sink over the ridge. The air cooled. The firelight behind them began to flicker through the open door, painting both their faces gold, and for the first time in years, Cale Ryder felt something like peace settle deep inside him. Not loud, not sudden, just steady, like the hum of an old song finding its way home. It started with a need as simple as flour. They'd run low on supplies, and Cale knew the road to town was the last place either of them wanted to go. But winter was edging close, and the hills didn't care for pride. By late morning, they rode down the ridge trail together. Alara sat quiet on the wagon seat beside him, hands tucked beneath her shawl, eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind lifted her hair, and for the first time, Cale noticed a faint calm in her face. Peace looked good on her. You don't have to come inside, he said. I can get what we need and be done quick. She shook her head. If I stay behind, they'll talk worse. Let them see I ain't hiding. He admired that kind of courage, even if it made him uneasy. Dry Hollow looked smaller than before. Same cracked windows, same faces pretending not to stare. The general store bell jingled when they walked in, and the noise dropped like a stone in water. The storekeeper, Mr. Hastings, was polishing his counter. He didn't look up. Well, look who's crawled out the hills, he said. You keepin' strange company these days, Ryder. Cale ignored the jab, started collecting what they needed. Flour, salt, lamp oil. Alara moved to the far end of the counter, eyes down, tracing the wooden grain like she could disappear into it. Then a woman's voice cut through. Ain't that the quiet one Marshall sold? The witch girl? The room filled with whispers, thin as smoke. Cale straightened slowly. That's enough. The laughter stopped, but only for a breath. Marshall Hollis himself stepped through the doorway, hat dripping rain. Well, thought I told you to stay clear of town, Ryder. His eyes slid toward Alara. And you. Seems trouble follows you like a shadow. Alara stiffened. The old scar on her wrist caught the light. Cale's hand twitched near his belt. We came for supplies, that's all. Is that so? Hollis leaned on the counter. You buying charity now? Words traveling fast. Man like you keeping a witch woman in his cabin. Cale's voice turned to gravel. Watch your tongue, the marshal smirked. You forget she's got a mark? That thing's cursed, son. Folks been saying she brought death up north before she ever set foot here. Alara's breath hitched. The color drained from her face, but she said nothing. That mark saved my life once. Cale said quietly. Hollis laughed, the sound mean and hollow. Or maybe it cursed it and you ain't noticed yet. The room's silence felt like a blade. Cale looked around, at faces he'd known for years, now turned sharp and small. He realized then what she must have felt every day of her life. He gathered the supplies, slammed a few coins on the counter, and turned toward the door. "Come on," he said to Alara. But she didn't move. Her eyes were wet, her voice soft. "You shouldn't have to defend me." "Don't matter what I should," he said. "Let's go." She stepped back instead. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Wherever I go, it ends like this." Before he could answer, she turned and walked out into the rain. By the time Cale reached the street, she was gone, swallowed by the storm and the narrow alleys beyond. He stood there, rain running down his collar, the world tilting under the weight of too many things unsaid. Hollis called from behind him. "Best let her go, Ryder. Some folks ain't meant to be saved." Cale didn't answer. He just stared down the muddy road where her footprints were already washing away. Inside his chest, something cracked. Not anger, not fear, but the hollow sound of a man realizing he'd lost more than he understood. The rain thickened, drumming against his hat brim. Somewhere in the hills above, thunder rolled like judgment itself. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. By the third, Cale Ryder saddled his horse and rode out anyway. The air was cold, raw enough to sting, but he didn't care. The emptiness of the cabin was worse than the storm ever could be. Her shawl still hung near the door, faintly smelling of smoke and sage. He followed her trail into the foothills, through mud and pine, his thoughts circling the same quiet truth. He'd done the one thing she feared most, let the world's cruelty echo between them. By dusk, the tracks faded into the high valley. That's where he saw it, the faint smoke of a small fire under a rock overhang. Alara, the word came out more like a prayer than a name. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, streaked with rain, but her eyes still held that calm strength, the kind that made a man want to kneel without knowing why. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. He dismounted, boots sinking into wet earth. "Shouldn't have let you leave. You don't owe me anything, Cale." He shook his head. "It ain't about owing. It's about not being a coward." For a while, the only sound was the wind moving through the pines. Cale took off his hat, rain dripping from the brim. "When they talked in that store, I didn't stop 'em soon enough. I thought walking away would be mercy, but it wasn't. It was fear." Alara looked at him, her voice trembling but steady. "Fear doesn't make you cruel. It just makes you human." "Maybe," he said, "but I've been human long enough. Time I try being better." He stepped closer, holding out something in his hand. It was her shawl, folded neat, the edge stitched with a small silver button, the same one he'd carried since her mother saved him. Her eyes softened. "You fixed it. Figured it was my turn to mend something." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she reached out, fingers brushing his, light, uncertain, real. The wind eased. A soft hush settled over the valley. Cale drew a breath that felt like the first in years. "I don't know what happens next," he said, "but if you stay, this place will be yours as much as mine." "Ain't nobody gonna sell or judge you again." Her lips curved, small, tired, but true. "And if I stay, what will they say?" He smiled faintly. "They'll say what they want. But maybe one day, when the talk dies down, they'll see what I see. A woman who survived more than most men ever could." She looked away, blinking hard. "You talk like a preacher." "Only on my good days." That earned a soft laugh from her, the first sound of warmth since Dry Hollow. They stood together until the rain began to thin, until the sky turned that quiet color between night and morning. Then, wordlessly, they started back. By the time they reached the cabin, the clouds had broken. The place looked different somehow. Same roof, same walls, but alive again. Alara set a pot by the fire, her hands sure and calm. Cale hung his hat on the peg and poured water into the tin kettle. When their eyes met across the room, something in both of them settled. Not a spark, not a rush, but a steady glow. The kind you build, not chase. Cale sat down near the stove, boots steaming. "You know," he said, half grinning, "folks'll say I brought home trouble." Alara poured him coffee and answered softly, "Then let it trouble them, not us." The fire crackled, warm and low. Outside, the rain gave way to a pale sunrise stretching across the valley. Cale looked toward the light, then back at her. "You're home now," he said quietly. Ilara smiled, the kind of smile that could outlast storms, and for the first time since the day he saw that mark on her wrist. Cale Ryder knew he'd finally paid his debt, not with silver or sorrow, but with the life they'd both chosen.